Hello, welcome to the latest episode of the Intuitive Frameworks. My name is Amii Hue, and I am here to talk about the limitations of labels, meaning of why I personally don't think that labels are the end of be all, especially going into the world. Especially in this day and age, we are all constantly are obsessed with labels to have some sort of like self-identification, ways to stand out from the norm, from the crowd. But for me, I'm someone who has always been a minority wherever I go. And just a short bit of my background, which is me being living in South Africa as a Taiwanese, and there's not many Asian people in South Africa, in particular of someone who looks like me, and East Asians in particular, because there's a huge Indian population. And even if I go back to Taiwan, I've always been seen as like the odd person because experiences differ from one another. I may look and sound and may mimic, but our experiences are very different. And even if I talk to other overseas Asian people, we still differ in our experiences because our environment and the type of household that we grow in still differs from one another. I always felt very odd as a kid, and if that's very cliche as it sounds, I am someone who likes to stay in my own little world. Like even as a kid, I just didn't really want to talk with other people. I wasn't keen to interact with others. I just want to play in my own little world. However, one thing is very certain is once I went to school, when schooling became very important and things getting graded and the expectation like, oh, you need to step up your game now. My quote unquote like dyslexic tendencies are just not excusable. Not for my parents, not for my schooling environment, just not of it all. Did I feel bad about it? At times, yes, but I don't believe, at least in my environment at that time, there was no handouts for whoever is not really doing so well. It's like your responsibility as an individual. In my case, I was very lucky that my parents were able to afford tutors for me to help me through my homework because my parents primarily grew up in Taiwan, grew up there, studied there, everything, and English as a second language. And me growing up here is very tricky with parents with very high expectation, but wasn't able to blend into my environment. Doesn't matter if it's my environment in South Africa or in Taiwan. I just didn't feel I could connect. But in other words, I've always been just a sensitive and very stubborn child since I was young. But going into school, first grade, and through my schooling career, one thing was for sure is that I just didn't really want to be left behind by the crowd, which was definitely a huge indicator of a lot of my peers just really wanted to do well in school. And I also felt that expectation with my parents as well. And with that, I decided that I have to really be responsible and do my best. But one thing's for sure is that I'm always willing to try my best, no matter how many times I have to do things over. If I got a lower grade, I'm like, no, I have to do better next time. This is just not just for my parents, but this is primarily for myself because my own ego and self-esteem just can't take it. And with that, even if I was weaker in my language ability or even try to understand concepts, I had to push forward to do my best because humiliation to get the lowest grade and being judged by my peers and by my teachers is the worst feeling. I only discovered that I have my disability with language, meaning like when I was reading text and stuff like that, I naturally sometimes end up reading from right to left, whether it's calling out numbers, try to pronounce like certain words that I have never seen before. If words that I may heard of before but I've never seen, I just couldn't compute one or two together. And it took a lot of effort, a lot of trial and error, a lot of practice, but I was always willing to try to learn because I was actually partly inspired by the movie Matilda because I want to be like Matilda when I was young, to be like the smart girl. I wasn't really the smartest, but I really want to do my best in everything that I do. And everything comes down to language. It doesn't matter if it's Chinese or English, but language was always been difficult for me when I was young, to try to comprehend grammar, verbiage, everything of that matter. And the only way for me to communicate was through art through colors, and try keeping things in order. And things that are very like black and white was easy for me to comprehend. But something that's very abstract was difficult for me to get the full picture. So I ended up just try my best. Try to do like cognitive exercises like fingers, and it's like this, like doing some spinnings and so forth. That was really helpful. And my mom even put me like through speech therapy, all of those things. Had so many omega-3s when I was young just to cope with the learning. But one thing's for sure is that I was pretty good at trying to understand concepts, bringing the full picture. I've always been interested in history, sciences, math, and so forth, but language was something I couldn't comprehend. But everything changed when I moved to China to study at an international school because I have ambition to go to the US at the time and study the IB curriculum, IB being International Baccalaureate program. Partially did the middle school program, then full on doing the diploma program, which, funny enough, when we were picking our subjects, I had no choice but to choose English, language, and literature, high level. In other words, you have to read 2 more extra books compared to the standard level. And you have to know these books back to front like it's the back of your hand, because it's going to be referred to in the final examination. And what was interesting about language and literature is that you have to talk about the cultural context, the language, literacy, devices, and so on and so forth. Imagine trying to write an essay, but it's spoken word, and you have to prepare the essay within, I believe it was 15 minutes when you see the content of the paper, which was a lot to take in and took a lot of practice of saying the ums and the likes and the filler words. Lots of practice. All it was lots and lots of practice. God bless my teacher, Mrs. Scott, for keeping up with her patience and willing to teach me to do the things that I need to do. Because she said that my grades were so bad, I was like a 1 out of 7. And 7 is, imagine being the university level, and the course itself is university level. And the passing grade is at least a 4. So I was like, oh, what? Because I wasn't getting it at the time. But through lots of practice, through practice examinations, reading, lots of dedication, because my teacher, she was like so good at what she does. But what I forgot to mention is that a lot of teachers in the past just gave up on me because I just couldn't get what they were trying to tell me. Just couldn't get me, because they just saw that, oh, because she was like Asian, Taiwanese, oh, her English is bad. But in reality, language is just wasn't my natural talent. But through my dedication, even though I had this label, just willingness to do my best, even though I was labeled stupid, I was labeled like, what's the word, not able to comprehend what my thoughts are as a normal person. I just push forward, just no matter what. From my labels that I was diagnosed by, through my own determination. And in the end, in terms of working hard, I have to work 3 times harder compared to my classmates. 2 times harder. And in the end, my predicted grade at the time was a 5 because I worked really hard. I really understand the context. And what really saved me was that the curriculum itself, it has different criterias, meaning, are you able to understand the context, explaining the cultural context, literacy, devices, have your ideas organized in an order, and grammar is a separate criteria. So I have 4 different criteria. My teacher was clever enough to at least knowing that I was able to at least organize my ideas, understand the context of the books and literacy works very well. So I was able to at least get 3 out of the 4 criteria down to the T. In the end, when I got my final results for English, I got a 6 out of 7, which was like, oh my gosh, I really proved myself that as long as I work hard, no matter what label society puts on me, I'm the one who could prove it right. It doesn't matter what obstacles thrown at you, because you have to decide for yourself what you have to do moving forward, because you are the only one who could change your outcome. And in the end, for me, it doesn't matter what people think of me. It doesn't matter what people thought of me. It doesn't matter what people speak behind my back. As long as I'm moving forward, at least with this English language examination result as my proof of concept, I believe that anyone could do the same as well. As long as you're extremely determined, you need to go through the tough challenges to prove that you can do it. Challenges are what meant to do, challenge you, grow as a person. And once you're able to overcome that obstacle, you go 2 times or 3 times further ahead than your peers. So to sum it up, the labels that society puts onto you or you decide onto yourself, it's just a label. Actions and labels don't need to correlate with one another, or the things that you cannot change about yourself. We cannot change our race, we cannot change our nationality. You can, but not everyone has the opportunity to do it. Your ability, what you do as a job, it's only just a portion of you. You're so much more than that. And words of encouragement is that who do you want to be tomorrow, especially what your younger self wished to be? Because that's always a key to know where you need to do moving forward. And I hope this episode resonates with you and with this inspirational story. And thank you so much for listening. And if you really enjoy this episode, please subscribe, share this episode for those who really need to have a pickup. And I hope you have a good rest of your week, and see you next time. Bye.